behalf of our President, Kim Turner, my fellow Vice President, Theo Fox, and I would welcome you to today's lecture, which is the fourth in our series for 2025. The title of today's lecture is The Never-Ending Legend, the Anzac Landing on the 25th of April 1915, and it will be presented by one of our members, Dr. Mesut Uyar. On the 110th anniversary of the landing, this lecture explores the April landings, the Anzac spirit, and Turkey's and Australia's never-ending curiosity in the campaign. Dr. Uyar is a Turkish-Australian military historian. He is a former Turkish Army officer who has both operational and staff experience. He has taken part in United Nations peace support operations in Georgia and was wounded in Afghanistan. He is currently the University of New South Wales Ottoman Fellow and Associate Professor in the History faculty. He has authored numerous publications, including The Ottoman Army in World War I, The Ottoman Defence Against the Anzac Landing, 25th of April 1915, which is part of the Australian Army History Unit campaign series, and Phase Line Attila, the amphibious campaign for Cyprus, 1974. Would you please welcome Dr. Mesut Uyar to the podium.
I have to thank Ron and Royal United Services Institute for giving me opportunity to express my ideas, and I hope you're able to enjoy some of my ideas or findings. Feel free to express your criticisms or comments at the end of the talk. I think we will have some time. And before starting my talk, I would like to express that I am not a mythbuster. I am not against legends. I'm a conventional military historian with an actual experience in armed forces. My issue related with the legends, I got really pissed off that the legends affecting the history writing. And some of the points that I will raise during my talk is related with that anger that the legends affecting the history writing. Okay, let us rock and roll. So, we have a legend, and as you know, every legend has a kernel of truth. The legend of Troy related with the famous siege of Troy. There's a kernel of truth, and it is historical reality that on 25th April 1915, the Australians, New Zealanders at Anzac landed. That's reality. And most of the soldiers participated in this operation, saw the whole affair as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, the biggest adventure ever. Okay, you can find it from the personal war narratives of the soldiers, and as a Turkish military historian, I am able to find out from the documents in the Turkish archives, especially the prisoner of war interrogations, and one of the things that commonly appear in prisoner of war interrogations of the Australian soldiers, they say, we came here because of the sake of adventure. And we have another important element in play, that is the official history author Charles Bean. He was there as the official war correspondent, but he was very instrumental for the creation of all these legends. Immediately after the end of the war, the Australian troops were on the peninsula doing some occupational duties, but mostly related with Imperial War Cemetery works, finding the graves, creating cemeteries, etc. And during their stay, they did commemorate some of the anniversaries, and some civilian tourists also arrive there to visit the area, most of them parents of the killed soldiers. And during the Second World War, this legend grows. The AIF is still in action, participating to a new global war. But as you know, the legend lost its glamours during the late 1960s, early 70s, thanks to the Vietnam War, but also the aging, the disappearing of the original veterans. But things drastically changed. In 1974, Bill Gamage, an Australian scholar, published a very modest book at the beginning, The Broken Years, but this book started a chain reaction because one of the film directors, Peter Weir, got very influenced by this book, and he decided to shoot a movie about the experience of the Australian soldiers, the famous Gallipoli movie. And this movie, the real element for a huge nuclear chain reaction. But pay attention, both the Bill Gamage and Peter Weir put emphasis on the individuals, and they portrayed the soldiers as victims. So both in the Broken Years book and the movie, you see Australian soldiers, the Anzacs, as tragic heroes, not as warriors, but tragic victims of a war beyond their control. And later on, nowadays especially, going to Gallipoli before the dawn service, participating in the dawn service, transformed into a kind of a real pilgrimage, a kind of a secular religion. And this is especially affecting the young generations. I myself attending this ceremony starting from 1995, initially as a military officer, but as a ceremonial guard. And after the speech, if you want, I can tell you some anecdotes with my experiences with very eager Australian teenagers. And as far as I am concerned, this is beyond standard commemorations, beyond remembrance. It's a kind of a secular religion. And as you know, bookshelves are mourning under the weight of the books. And we have the library directors here. She can easily tell the number of the books every year the library receiving. And of course, the forgotten, the neglected title is very frequent with the books, and everyone would like to be part of the legend. The Russian Anzacs, the Jewish Anzacs, the Greek Anzacs, everyone want to be part of it. And most probably we will see in the future, near future, Vietnamese Anzacs, Chinese Anzacs, etc. I'm not against them if the text is factual, really provide a contribution to the history writing. And of course, in every action, there must be an equal and opposite reaction. So myth busting is also common, and we are frequently seeing titles written either by scholars or amateurs trying to myth bust some of the legends, or saying that the Anzac legend overshadowing other equally important issues. And of course, there is also a backlash for the mythbusters, saying that they are against the history and the heritage of the Anzacs. Okay, let us start from the beginning. In 1919, Charles Bean, our official war historian, arrives as a part of a delegation, a mission, to find answers to questions related with tactical and technical aspects of the campaign, and also collect some war material for the creation of a museum, the famous war memorial. He had some officers and artists with him, and he managed to get some Turkish guides to guide him on the terrain. The issue is, unlike the standard conventional military historians or history writing, Charles Bean, instead of coming from up to bottom, from high up to the bottom, he preferred to move from individual level to the up. He put special attention to the individual stories. And if you scroll through his book, 2 thick volumes, you will find out lots of names on each page, and under the page footnotes, he will provide you detailed information about each individual. Because he is obsessed with details, most of the questions he tried to find answers related with the details. For example, how many machine guns initially faced the Anzacs on 25th April? And he created a chain reaction for the others to follow. I mean, see the Gallipoli movie of the Peter Weir. You will see lots of machine guns appearing again and again. And in a very militarily ridiculous way, seeing 4 machine guns side by side in open, and the Turkish machine gunners sadistically mowing down line after line Australian soldiers. Another question, for example, he said, who advanced the farthest? He had some candidates, and the way he presents in the book is completely unmilitary, against the military norms, against the military history writing. It is giving as if the account of a race, some athletes competing with each other in order to reach the farthest point. These individualist aspects, these individual stories, created the individual wisdoms, courage, endurance, mateship, sacrifice. And these are key elements in all the official and popular military history books written and printed in Australia. Okay, the problem here is when you are focused too much on individuals, on single trees, you lost the sight of the forest. And this is one of the issues haunting most of the books published about the Australian experience in Gallipoli. Why the Australians were there? First of all, we need to see the forest, the big picture. This was a global war between multinational empires. So the Australians did not arrive to Gallipoli as Australians, they arrived there as British soldiers. They did not fight against the national state of Turkey, they fought against the Ottoman Empire. In addition to the Australians, there were New Zealanders, there were Indians, there were British, French, and when I say British, that means include all the paraphernalia, all the ethnic groups of the British, later on joined by the Canadians, even individuals from Caribbean islands. And for the Ottomans, in addition to the Turks, there were other ethnic groups of the empire. But nowadays, this is painted as if two nations, the Australians and the Turks, fighting on Gallipoli Peninsula. Okay, in addition to the multinational empires, we are talking about two large military alliances, British, French, Russians, and others, against the Germans, Austrians, Hungarians, the Turks, and later on the Bulgarians. At the beginning of the war, everybody expected a bloody war, but it would be short. They were expecting big maneuvers, large maneuvers, achieving the victory in a short time. It didn't happen, neither at the Western Front nor the Eastern Front. And the Austrian armies stuck against the Serbs. So they started to find a solution to the deadlock. And one of the solutions was related with the strategical ways to overcome the deadlock. There were other attempts of solutions, tactical solutions, technological solutions, but the strategic solution focused on finding new allies like Italy, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, and opening new fronts. Additionally, there was the factor of the Maslow's hammer. The British had a huge navy, but it was unable to use it against the Germans directly. So you have a navy unable to use, and you are looking desperately to find a way how to use the navy. So the classic Maslow's hammer and nail issue. Additionally, the British at that time, the British leaders were thinking that the Ottomans were cowards because of the recent experiences of the Balkan Wars, in which the Ottoman armies defeated against the Greeks, the Serbs, the Montenegrins, and the Bulgarians. The Ottoman armies melted against the small Balkan nations, so the British, expecting that if they managed to show the Union Jack, the Ottoman soldiers immediately flee, because they fled in front of the Greeks and the Bulgarians. So when they saw the might of the British dreadnoughts, warships, and the Union Jack, they will certainly flee. And we need to include Churchill also. I mean, without Churchill, we couldn't have this quagmire. Thanks to Churchill, I'm able to speak in front of you right now. So the Navy trying to find a strategic solution, hitting the soft belly of the Austria and Germany from the south, connecting with Russia, getting the Russian grain, giving them weapons and ammunition, and very important element, the Churchill, trying to find a way to use the Navy effectively, and he was very aggressive, and he wanted to show himself at the same time. And we know the story, thanks to the luxury of hindsight. On March 1915, the Navy alone, part of the campaign, failed. Because they committed a lot, and they didn't want to lose prestige against an Oriental nation, they had to try the land also. But don't forget, what was the main aim? To reach Istanbul, kick the government out, force the Ottoman nation to surrender. Because at that time there was a thinking that if the British Navy able to reach Istanbul, all the local people will rebel against the Ottoman leaders, the Committee of Union and Progress, the Ottoman dictators they called, because the people, according to the British intelligence, were not happy with their leaders. They were searching for a solution, and with the arrival of the British Navy in front of Istanbul, they will certainly rebel, kick the government out, they will surrender. End of the story, and the Allied armies marching against the Germany and Austria from the south. So this aim did not change. The main aim of the whole Gallipoli campaign is let the Navy pass the strait and reach Istanbul. So the plan for amphibious landing, the land operation, was to capture dominant ground on Gallipoli Peninsula, destroy the European fortresses, suppress the Asian fortresses, clean the mines, and let the Navy pass the strait. So, when we take a look at what was the duty of the Anzacs, the Australians, number one aim, capturing Hill 971 block and Maltepe Hill, reaching the strait, and it failed. Number two aim was to divert the Ottoman reserve away from Hellas, because the Hellas was the main landing. So the main actor on 25th April was not the Australians, not the Anzacs, but the British. The British 29th Division was responsible to achieve the main aim of capturing Kilit Bahir Plateau. So the Anzacs landed at Arabunu, the Anzac place, as a secondary landing to support the landing at Hellas. And in terms of aim 2, it was a success. While the British facing 2 Ottoman infantry regiments on 25th April, the Anzacs managed to pull the army reserves and face 4 regiments at the beginning. So this is the part of the success they achieved on 25th April. If you take a look at the August offensive, we are seeing the same scenario, trying to capture the dominant ground, reach the straits, destroy the fortresses, clean up the mines, and let Navy the pass. And it also failed. Okay, what if? If you are a reader of Charles Bean, you will come across lots of what ifs and might have beens. If we're able to capture that small hill, if we're able to capture that part of the trenches, if that guy on that specific day able to reach that place, everything would be very different. And this what ifs might have been still affecting the history writing. What is missing is not seeing the other side. In a war, you at least have 2 sides. You need to see what the other side was doing. It's an interaction between both sides. And when you see the Ottoman army as a European army, functioning as an army, with field army, army corps, divisions, regiments, battalions, companies. And when you started to treat the Ottomans as conventional army, you started to ask the right questions. And on the Ottoman part, you are seeing some dramatic changes. For example, the Ottoman army was the first army that introduced triangular division system. Was it important? Yes. Most of the armies during the First World War introduced the triangular system because to get rid of the excessive headquarters to have more firepower. And this was the guy, Esad Pasha, who was in charge of the whole defense of the Gallipoli Peninsula. And these were his units, 3 divisions, 1 cavalry brigade. You are seeing lots of numbers. This is one of the things missing in Charles Bean's and most of the works. They are talking about the enemy, but always talking globally, not providing the substance, the real element of military history writing, numbers, lacking numbers. And when you are talking about a conventional military, then you should talk about strategy, operational aspects, concepts, such as the coastal defense concept. If you take a look at the Bean's book and most of the books available, they are not questioning Did the Ottomans have a defense concept? They did. And this was the concept before the arrival of the von Sanders. Von Sanders arrived to the Gallipoli on 25th March, and he decided to change the defense concept. And he changed it like that, moving the troops away from the coast, keeping large reserves, covering the coastline with screening troops, weak screening troops. A huge difference. I mean, think about that. If the Anzacs landed against such a defense concept, because the Ottomans already identified the Arab and Anzac region as a possible landing site, think about that, facing all this firepower during the landing. But thanks to Liman von Sanders, they face a weak screening troops. This was the general outline of the defense concept. Okay, one thing that you come across in most of the Australian military history books about the Gallipoli campaign, they talk about important figures. Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the genius on the ground, Liman von Sanders, the field army commanders. And there are lots of talks about the Germans. The German advisors, the German officers, always on the ground. But no talks about the other officers. And this gives the impression that thousands of brave Turkish soldiers, commanded by a few generals, Atatürk, von Sanders, but nothing in between. As if this is not a conventional army, but an armed horde. Armed individuals like primitive tribal warriors. But in reality, there was a field army, army corps, divisions, regiments, battalions, companies. And after that, we have thousands of soldiers. Okay, when you introduce this element, seeing the Ottomans as a conventional army, you're able to find answers to most of the questions that being unable to solve even after visiting the peninsula a second time during the peace period. Having the Turkish personnel available to answer the questions. For example, what happened to the 6th Battalion? On the 9th of 25th April, 6th Battalion disappeared. And this is one of the questions that being asked frequently during the first volume. The answer is easy. If you treat the other side as a conventional military, you find out that the Ottoman 77 Regiment during the night conduct an offensive. It was a mixture of success and failures. They were able to overrun the 6th Battalion positions, but later on they got confused and ran away. And you can easily get this answer if you treat the other side as equal and use the same standards you are using for yourself. And some of the things are interesting. For example, Major Zeki Bey was the guide of the Charles Bean. He was a battalion commander during the campaign. He was one of the battalion commanders of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. And thanks to Major Zeki, Bean discovered the importance of Atatürk during the first day and during the later phases of the campaign. He discovered this in 1919 thanks to this gentleman, Zeki Bey. And Zeki Bey sent by the Ottoman General Staff randomly. They were looking somebody who able to communicate with the foreigners and who actually participated in the campaign, and they found Zeki Bey. Think about, they were finding some other battalion commanders, sending to the Gallipoli, and we would have a different Beans approach to the Turkish side. So one single individual changed most of the things being wrote down to cover the Turkish side of the story. I mean, we cannot let this happen, at least for the modern history writing. And we should be aware and make use of the availability of the internet, the digitalized archives, availability of lots of news sources, lots of new books, and hopefully we will be able to have a better military history, but at the same time we will be able to enjoy our legend, our myths better. Because the current situation is such a way that as if we created our legend by using some cards, playing cards, and we are very afraid that if we're able to pull one of the cards, our whole structure would collapse. I mean, if this Anzac legend is so important for us, for the current generation, for the future generations, we should not treat this legend as a box of playing cards. Okay, if you are interested about this, I wrote down a book covering the single day of the Ottoman defense. You will find out lots of more information that I mention about it in this book. The hard copies already disappeared, but you can still get the digital copies, or you can get the hard copies from the second-hand book dealers. I don't think the Australian Army History Unit will publish a third edition. It's expensive and I don't see any reason for that. Okay, this is the end of my talk.
Thank you, Mesut. We now have time for some questions. Please state your name and affiliation before asking your question, and would, in courtesy to other questioners, please shorten that to a question only with no preamble. Thank you. John.
John Hitchin, ASI. My question appears from your lecture that the Germans' appreciation of defence was very worse. The Ottomans had a good defence appreciation. The Germans came along and effectively stuffed it up.
That's correct. I mean, in 1914, before the Gallipoli landing, there was two ideas related with amphibious landing and defense against the amphibious landing. So one idea was to keep the coastline on possible landing sites as strong as possible and to destroy the landing force on sea before they're able to set their foot. The second idea was to let the amphibious troops land and destroy them in spatially prepared areas, dead zones. So the Ottoman staff officers were thinking that it would be better to kill all the landing troops before they set foot, and this turned out to be the correct idea. But von Sanders and some others were thinking that we cannot keep all the coastal lines strong, and in case if they landed someplace that we did not anticipate, then we will have in deep trouble. So von Sanders preferred to keep the coastline with weak screening troops having large reserves. The problem was, at that time on Gallipoli Peninsula there were not enough roads, so moving reserves from one location to another was a serious trouble. And that was what they discovered after the 25th April landings. And don't forget, the Anzacs managed to divert the army reserves away from the main landing site. Atatürk was the officer in charge of the Army Reserve, and he saw the situation at Anzac more dangerous than the one in Hellas. And it turned out to be true. But think about it, the guys landing at Hellas, able to overcome the two regiments facing them, rapidly moving inland, what would happen? The Ottoman reserves unable to move against them.
Was there much Australian input into the strategy of the battle, or was it all determined by the British? And secondly, given the power of the White Australia Policy and the attitudes around that at that time, did that affect, do you think, the attitude that the Australian soldiers took towards the Turks and how they therefore fought the battle?
Okay, the answer for the first question is easy. No, because the strategy designed in London. So even Ian Hamilton, the guy commanding the all troops at that time, had no effect on the strategy. And Australians started to gain some influence at the Western Front when they finally had their own generals participating in the decision-making processes. But even at Western Front, they didn't influence the strategy. They managed to influence some of the large tactical operations, and their influence about the operational aspects, I put a question mark. I don't think they're able to influence even the operational aspects. Related with your second question, most of the Australian soldiers did not know anything about the other nations, Oriental nations, Middle Easterners or Turks. They got their first experience in Egypt, and that experience was very negative. So most of the locals they met, either businessmen trying to sell something or prostitutes. So when they landed on 25th April, they were expecting some kind of Cairo Arabs defending the coastline. They changed these ideas in May after lots of battles, and during the 20th May armistice, when they started to collect dead bodies on the battleground, had some opportunity to meet Ottoman soldiers, Turkish soldiers doing the same business, some fraternizing, a kind of an understanding that the other side, not some street sellers of Cairo or pimps selling women, but conventional soldiers. They got a better understanding about it. But, I mean, it was a process. And it was not always a progressive process, because the same guys fought on Gallipoli and gained a respect for the Turkish soldiers, lost their respect during their period at Palestine campaign. I mean, the Lighthouse guys completely had different aspects of the Turkish soldiers than the ones on Gallipoli Peninsula. And you can easily find out from the published memoirs or diaries.
Hello, Dr. Mesut. My name is Max. I'm with RUSI. And I just have a quick question about what influence did the Turkish Sultan at the time have in decisions? Was he a military strategist, or was he being advised by his military advisors? Did he have any say in these matters, defence?
Well, the quick answer is no. Mehmet V, better known as Rashad, had no influence whatever. He was just a figurehead. He had no understanding of what is going on related with the war effort, who is doing what. But he was a very good-looking old man, like a Santa Claus, good for photos, showing some good emotions to the soldiers, decorating them, etc. But no.
Not a military man.
No.
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel William Wolfe, now retired. The German military mission brought many qualified staff officers to assist in the campaign. How well did they integrate with the Turkish graduates of their staff college, given the massive casualties in the First Balkan War?
Okay, in terms of the German direct influence, it was limited. So on 25th April, on the peninsula, the only German officers that had potential to affect the situation was Liman von Sanders. So, division commanders, there were two divisions, 9th and 19th were Turks. All the regiment commanders were Turks. All the battalion commanders were Turks on 25th April on Gallipoli Peninsula. There was one division commander, he was at Saros. He moved to the Hellas 2 days later. There was one German Army Corps commander, but he was on Asian side, facing the French, and he failed drastically against the French. The issue of the German influence was the Ottoman army, the Ottoman officer corps, created according to the German model starting from 1883. So many German advisors, different German missions served before the Liman von Sanders. All the Ottoman officers trained according to the German system. Some of them had chances to go to Germany on the job training or getting education at the German Staff College. So the German system well established within the Ottoman military. The Liman von Sanders mission reinforced the German influence, but in terms of finding individual German officers on 25th April, there were none. But the Anzacs, during the landing, discovered different German officers, most probably because of the quality of the uniforms of the Ottoman officers different from the soldiers, and they presumed that this guy should be a German. Looks how well dressed he was, how German looking he was, etc. But on 25th April, the Australians did not face even a single German soldier. They would later on during the campaign, but the real influence of the Germans, the long process started in 1883, successive German officers, successive German military missions, and in the end creating a German-like military of the Ottoman army.
My name is Bob Hunter, I'm Visitor. The fact that the British landed on a more favourable spot and the Australians landed on a most unfavourable spot, is that indicative of the way the British Admiralty or the British hierarchy were treating the Australians? In other words, where we were regarded maybe as respectable, where we could have got a better landing spot than the incredible nasty place we landed at.
Well, in terms of how the British command, the British generals seeing the Anzacs, before 25th April, they didn't know. The Anzac troops, a mixed bag. There were some ideas, some expectations that they might be good soldiers, but because of the impression during the Egypt period, during the training, some of the rowdy behavior of the Anzacs, there was some question marks about the Anzacs' capability to achieve this job. And we see this issue especially on 25th April, 26th and 27th April, when there was a discussion to evacuate the Anzac, because they were thinking that you see the Australians and New Zealanders completely failed as a soldier material. They were not good as the British soldiers, so it's better to take them out. And that was the first impression. The British generals gained better understanding of the potential of the Australian soldiers later on. And even in later on phases, there are lots of stereotypical approach, seeing all the Australian soldiers, bushfighters, coming from isolated villages, very physically strong, had a farming experience, good peasant soldiers, but that was not the case, as you know. At that time, the societies all very racist, not only against the foreigners, but also the people within your society. For a regular British officer without an Australian experience, the Australians just some backward colonials coming for the empire's call, must be treated carefully. Somebody between primitive Orientals and civilized Europeans, something in between.
Quite right. Could you answer the second part of the question, which was what was the role the Australians were given, and was that a lesser role because they weren't alone?
Well, it was a lesser role. It was a secondary landing. It was supposed to spot the main landing at Hellas. And why the Australians, the Anzacs, selected for this role? Because at that time, Ian Hamilton had 29th British Division, full professional. That was the only 19th Division. Full professional division consists of long service professional soldiers, and he was expecting that the 19th Division would achieve better results than the untried citizen soldiers of the Australians.
Kind of related.
Please wait until you get to my phone.
Just indirectly related. Why did Turkey remain neutral in the Second War, and did the experience of the First War, this sort of thing, influence that decision?
Yes. Turkey lost millions, half of the country occupied, the farmlands, cities, towns destroyed, and the Turks did their best to stay away another global conflict, which they would not gain much, but they will lose much. And don't forget, in 1939 or in 1940, the population of Turkey is around 20 million. Half of them recent immigrants from the Balkans, from the Caucasus, from the Arabian provinces. Everyone having somebody lost within their family. The percentage of males within the population is less than 30%. So we are talking about a nation consists of lots of war widows. The number of the widows receiving help from the government in 1940 was 1.5 million. And in terms of the weapons, the military technology, the Turkish army in 1940 had exactly the same technology and the weapons as in 1918, with some tanks, some mechanized transport system, but in terms of cannons, in terms of infantry, weapons, machine guns, rifles, everything 1918. And the Turkish leaders knew that because the Turkish president was a general during the First World War. Most of the high rankings had military experience during the First World War, and none of them willing to commit Turkey to gain some islands, to gain some territory from the neighbors by losing thousands or millions during the Second World War.
Last question.
Thank you very much, Fred Chilton. I'm a member. When I was growing up, part of the myth was that the Poms couldn't navigate properly and dumped us on the wrong place. About 20 years ago, I read a book by an intelligence officer, an Australian Air Force intelligence officer, who looked at the planning reports by the staff, and that all along the Australian staff officers were planning for the particular landing where they landed. Would you care to comment on any of that?
Well, in terms of the level of the capability of the Australian staff officers, we have some evidence related with the August offensive. As you know, the initial idea of the August offensive started by the Australian staff officers. They would like to enlarge their pocket at Anzac by capturing the northern part of it. They prepare a plan after observing the enemy closely, finding the weak spots and thinking that they could be able to expand the Anzac pocket bridgehead to the north. And their plan initiated the August offensive because Ian Hamilton and British staff officers really liked the plan, and they decided to extend the plan by committing additional divisions, capturing Sula and using Sula as a logistical base to jumpstart a major offensive from the Anzac. So that process started thanks to the plan prepared by the Australian staff officers. It didn't serve well in the end, but the original idea was bright. The Australians learned their stuff by doing it. They didn't learn it from staff academies, general staff colleges, military academies. They learned it by doing it. And this gave them some advantage, but at the same time, disadvantage because they didn't able to see the big pictures anyway. Because, for example, they were thinking that capturing Çanakkale would be enough to overcome the Ottoman offensive or Ottoman defense system. If you go to Gallipoli, if you stand on Çanakkale, look to the northeast, you will see more hills. Okay, you need to capture them also. When you capture the famous hill 971, you will see that there are other hills before you reach the strait. Okay, after capturing all of them, but don't forget you need to carry all the heavy guns, their ammunition, without using mules, without using horses, any mechanized transport. You need to carry all of them. You need to carry all the food, all the waters with you. And if you're able to capture whole peninsula, whole Gallipoli Peninsula, destroy the fortresses controlling the strait, you still need to destroy the fortresses on the Asian side. You still need to clean the mines. You still let the navy to reach Istanbul. You need to convince the Turkish public to rebel against the leadership. You need to get in a very short time, a surrender, general surrender of the Ottoman Empire. All this wishful thinking, and none of the Australian general staff officers at that time thinking about that. They were thinking to capture some dominating ground, this hill, that hill, extend the bridgehead to the north to have more space so that they're able to make use of their forces better, to have more logistical support, etc. So at the tactical and low-level operational level, they are good. They learn their trade. But at the higher echelons of the operational level and strategy, they didn't have a clue.
Thank you, Mesut. Definitely a last question.
Bruce Grant, I'm unaffiliated. The Anzac Legend it's a big deal to Australians and New Zealanders. I'm curious, does it have any place in Turkish culture, and what what does modern day Turkey think of the Anzacs, if anything at all?
Well, it has a direct effect on Turkish system. There's a Turkish legend vis-a-vis the Anzac legend, and according to the Turks, Gallipoli was the first step for the foundation of the Turkish Republic, the first occasion in which the Ottoman army, the Turkish army, able to defeat the European armies, Western armies. The first place where our leader Mustafa Kemal Atatürk able to show his genius, able to show how effective as a military leader, but later on as a political leader. And there's another element of it, because the Australians and New Zealanders went to Gallipoli, continued to go to Gallipoli again and again, ever increasing numbers every year. This started to affect the Turkish public starting in 1980s. And people started to say, why we are not paying respect to our ancestors? Why we are not paying enough attention to Gallipoli? These foreigners coming from thousands of kilometers away, but we are not going there a couple of kilometers away. Why we are doing that? How ungrateful we are as a nation. And this created a kind of a process in which, by imitating, the Turks started to build up their legend, put some additional colors into it. My problem with the Turkish and Anzac legend is, it is not letting the others to be part of the legend. In Anzac legend, there's no place for the British, there's no place for the French, there's absolutely no place for the Indians. I mean, for an Indian to be part of the Anzac legend, he should wear an Australian uniform, an Anzac uniform. Wearing an Indian uniform, being on the ground, would not help you to be part of the legend. And this is also true for the Turkish legend. The Turkish legend also ignoring the role of the other nationalities, ethnic groups of the empire. So both legends fully national, ignoring the global war, ignoring the multinational empires, paying attention only their nationalities, and I think that's wrong. And our legend is problematic thanks to you.
Sorry, stay there, Mesut. How's everybody? To highlight, hello, I'm Theodora Fox, the other Vice President of RUSI. To highlight that, and before I even go into anything else, we do have a reading list on the Gallipoli landing, and it's a very good list that highlights what we do have in the research in the library itself. So please have a look at it if you get a chance. It's on our website. Mesut, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It was a wonderful talk. Really appreciate it. On behalf of RUS, I'd like to present you with a tie for the talk. Thank you very much. You're already a member of RUSI and a very welcome member because you use our library and research, and we hope that you benefit from it as well. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
I always appreciate.
On Friday, the 27th of June, 2025, be at the Parliament House Auditorium, Sydney. For the RUSI-Australia 5th International Dialogue Recruit and Retain. Challenges in sustaining a defence force in a modern democracy. For more information and to register, visit rusinsw.au/5 dialogue.
Lancer Barracks 2, Smith Street, Parramatta, is home to the 1st 15th Royal New South Wales Lancers, an Army Reserve Light Armoured Reconnaissance Regiment equipped with the PMVL Hawkeye. The barracks also house the Lancers Museum and its collection of vintage armoured vehicles. Vehicles the regiment has been equipped with since 1940. Vehicles that are for the most part restored to operational status, able to display their prowess to the public on a monthly basis. The museum is managed and staffed by volunteers, mostly veterans. public funding is limited to in-kind, the funds to maintain and display the collection comes from access fees, a bit of trading and generous public donations, mainly from the regimental alumni. Vehicles, however, have to be stored in the open covered in tarpaulins to mitigate rain and tempest damage. The museum needs your help. The museum is building sheds to cover and provide unfettered access to the collection, like these in the South African War Museum Johannesburg. A financial stretch beyond the museum's accumulated surplus. You can help donate at lancers.au.